Welcome to Primal Perspective. My name is Ben Sanford, and I'll be your guide today. In this series, I'm having conversations with my friends, colleagues, and teachers who have valuable and unique perspectives to share with the world. By exploring topics from a primal perspective, we can reveal the principles, processes, and patterns of nature, which enhance any practice and can give us insight into our lives. This month at Tribal Edge, the theme we're focusing on is combat and the nature of conflict. And I have a conversation with my good friend Mike Lazzari. And Mike is a Marine, a martial artist, and a mountain man, among many other things. And we have a great conversation, probably the beginning of many more. And it's especially fun for me because we have a common language through martial arts and also our training together at Tribal Edge and the Tribal Edge Journey program. I hope you enjoy this conversation. And now, Mike Lazzari. So thanks for being here, Mike.
Yeah, gosh, man, thanks for having me. It's fun to come out of my somewhat solitary life of hermitude and engage in really significant and important topics and conversations.
So I was just thinking before we did this, how long have we known each other and been training together? Do you remember? Was it 2012?
Yeah, well, the first time was 2011, I think, where I showed up at tracker school and, you were just like one of the cool guys, like in the background, like teaching the martial arts. And then, then I think about a year passed, and then I ended up coming through some interesting circumstances, ended up coming to the small little town that you were from, and ended up coming to some classes that you were having. And then, and then it just sort of built from there. The more I came, the harder it was to leave. And then one time I came and I just didn't leave.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm really excited about for this particular interview. Mike and I have worked together for a long time. Mike was part of our Journey program and an apprentice at Tribal Edge, and also has done, I think, almost all of the protector courses that Chris Harley and I have run. Scout protector courses, and has been a huge contributor to that. So I don't know, he just brings such a unique perspective of kind of what I would say our primal Tribal Edge perspective on being a protector in combat, and as well as some call it real world experience out there. So I'll let Mike describe a little bit of his experience, whatever he wants to share. But so anyway, I'm just really excited that you bring such a cool perspective to this subject, which is actually really dear to me as well. I kind of say that the protector archetype, or that role, is really our focus or specialty amongst all of the skills at Tribal Edge. So it's kind of an important thing to me personally. So anyway, why don't for people that don't know you, let's go ahead and let you kind of share your background and relationship to combat, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised into a very competitive, very athletic community, and from the time I was like 3 years old, I was flopping around on the wrestling mat. And I think by the time I was 6, I was wrestling competitively with with other little 6-year-olds, and that sort of continued, and sports and competition was just a huge part of my life. Really throughout my life, I played 3 sports a year. I was it was like baseball in the spring, baseball and football in the summer, football in the fall, wrestling in the wintertime. And the interesting thing about like all those sports and just like competitive sports in general is, in essence, they are forms of combat. They're just combat with certain rules that we all agree to follow, and certain constraints that guide the energy of the game, right? Of the agreement of this is the goal, and so that was more a part of me, or that was instilled in me, that process of knowing myself through competition or through organized, constrained combat. And it's like, and there was always some, and you see it in our culture today, there's something really similar about the nature of competitive sports and like the warrior ethos. You see that in our culture a lot, almost like synonymously. And so when I went to college, I was playing college baseball, and in my mind, I was like, I always had this this desire or this need, actually, to like be a warrior, right? It was like, I think one of the richest things about why sports was so important for me, and why it was so rich, is like I was a representative of like my people, right? Like my tribe. I was a young person, getting closer to my, to the prime of my physicality, and through hard work, devotion, like all these attributes that you hear so often with competition, like all these things, discipline, sacrifice, like all these unpleasant things that you train yourself with in order to hone yourself into becoming a more effective warrior or athlete or representative of your people, to to represent your people in these various arenas. And so more than I knew at the time, that was like the deeper embodiment of my relationship with being an athlete. And it was my third year in college. My dad calls me at like 8 a.m, and I'm asleep because it's because class doesn't start for like 2 more hours. And I was just like working out and eating so much, and I think I just gained like 20 pounds of muscle, which was just amazing. So I was just feeling just strong and really activated, and I was a significant part of the organization that I was with. And I get this phone call, and my dad's like, "Turn on the news," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, so like I turn on our little TV, and it was September 11th, 2001, and it was like watching that whole thing happen. Like in those few hours, I was like, that was one of the first times that I really started to notice that, wow, this thing that I am, like this desire inside me, like this force that drives pretty much like almost all of my behavior as a young man. It's to be a warrior, right? And to be a warrior for my people, and to put myself in harm's way if that's what it takes to keep people safe, or to protect people, or to protect the people that I love. It's like that, more than anything, is what lives like super close to like my core. And I remember telling my dad at that point right there, I was like, because I think we had discussed it at some point. I was like, Dad, like, I told you if something like this ever happened, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to go serve. And my dad's like, whoa, slow way down. And, but, I was 21 and nothing was going to slow me down. And there's this, this huge narrative that, we're under attack and there's a need for people to come and protect us. And so I dropped everything. I dropped out of college. My coaches were just like, they were unhappy. My family was unhappy. Everybody was really unhappy except for me. I was so solid in my choice and in my devotion to this path, right? It was like, for the people who have watched a few of these, the one with Chris Harley, there's a lot, there was, it was the path. And it's like, like he made the, used a metaphor about like tacking, like in a ship at sea. And it's like, you go here to go here, to go here, to go here. And it was like, that was such a huge tack point, because it was like all the things that I had been working towards and all the passion inside me that had been cultivated about being this representative of the people that I loved. It really culminated at this point, and it just fit for me as much up until that point with what I knew and with the amount of awareness that I had. It was the biggest, and in a lot of ways, it was the easiest choice, and probably the most significant choice as far as life-altering choices that I had made, and that took me right into the warrior culture. And I had a cousin who was a Marine, and so that's just like right where I went. And and it's like this myth that Marines are the toughest, Marines are the first to fight, and if you're in the service and you're not a Marine, you're probably gonna have something to say about that. But it was enough for me. And so I went hands down, and it was really interesting too, because though the people close to me were in this sort of like state of upheaval, like when they saw how grounded I was and how devoted to this path I was, it was like, man, they all just like lined up behind me, right? And like obviously it makes me a little emotional even talk about it now, but they saw in me that I was doing what I believed in, and they just rallied behind me, and we're just all support. And then so for the next 4 years, I just spent training and fighting. I was in Afghanistan in 2004 and 2005. I went to Iraq in 2006. And it's combat is just such a it's such a significant aspect of life, and I think due to its unpleasantness and the tragic nature of it, it's not all that well understood, and it's not all that thoroughly investigated. But it is a huge part of life in a lot of ways, on a lot of levels. And I think it's really important to have conversations like these. It's like, almost for the past 20 years, we've, to some degree, we've been, as a country, fighting wars. And so we have this huge population of veterans who have this combat experience to extremely varying degrees. But this experience that's so much different than the insulated domestic experience of, the average person, in a safe society. And it's like, it's tragic not to. It's like when we look at the suicide rates and stuff, it's like we're almost losing more people because they don't know how to reconcile those two worlds than we actually lost fighting in these wars. And it's a conversation that I think is uncomfortable enough to keep people not talking about it. And I think also too, it's because it's a really difficult thing to understand, especially if you haven't experienced it. And so it's almost like the gap is so big that it's like nobody knows how to start building the bridge. So I was a Marine, and then I got out, and then it was like going from combat to like this domesticated lifestyle was so jarring. And it was I don't think any of us really did. We didn't have any idea how jarring it would be. It was just this way of life, this intense way of life, this uninsulated way of life, this living in close proximity and relationship with death and with our own mortality became such a baseline that it was just who we were, and it happened so gradually and so thoroughly over, like months and months and even years, that, it's like we had no idea how deeply changed by this we were in relation to like the people that we left at home. And so I came home and I was like, wow, there's something about all this insulation, like all this domestic safeness, all the security that is, it was hard to find anything meaningful or anything fulfilling. So I kept trying to find something more fulfilling. So I went to paramedic school, and that was exciting enough, but it wasn't threatening enough to like bring me to like activate me relative to this place that I had lived in for for a couple of years. And then I was a firefighter for a while because like that was like being a little bit closer to danger, made me feel a little bit more alive. I could feel myself again, and I could feel that my choices matter, and that there's something really powerful about having feedback that's very direct, and having consequences for your actions. It actually, it really enables you to make clear and appropriate choices when the consequence is right here, right now, instead of there being all this insulation between your action and the effect that it's having out there somewhere that you maybe hear about sometime. So your behavior doesn't really have to modify, no regardless of what consequences is being sent out into the world. And that was really cool. And then I was offered a job to go back to the Middle East and protect embassy officials and State Department officials. And it was as soon as I could get there, the better. I wanted to be back in this place that I knew, back around individuals that I could relate with, actually have conversations with, and people who knew me through our shared experience. Because it was like, gosh, being at home it was really interesting and really difficult because like here I am surrounded by all these people that I love dearly, right? All these people that I left in the first place, right? All these people that I loved so much that I was willing to do everything to protect them. And then it's like, and then when I was gone, it was like, it's like, you know, they're there in the back of my mind and like deep in my heart the whole time. And you just can't wait to get back to them. And then you do, and you haven't realized that you've changed so much, and you've transformed so much, and you've developed relationships with life and death in a way that is unique to the context that you were in, and they're so profound that it creates a dissonance between your perspective or my perspective of life in the world and what it is to like be a human here, and people that have just a much different experience and haven't had the experience that that we had. And so to go back to that in any shape or form was I was just like desperate for it, like please, like my people, right? Which is weird because my people essentially were at home, these people I live in, and then so I did that for a few years, and then I just came home on leave one time, and I went to a Tom Brown tracker class the same summer that I ended up meeting you, Ben, and it was all about awareness, and it was all about tracking, and it was all about uninsulating yourself from the natural world. It was all about primal awareness, primal skills. Like it was slowly and in a way that's sustainable, uninsulating yourself and actually being able to like connect to the earth directly, right? And so I was going to go there for it was like a 2-week thing, and then I was going to go back to work in the Middle East. And after 2 weeks, I was so I was so moved. It was so evocative to start to have these sensations and feel this essentially like this power, this depth of relationship, and this uninsulated relationship with life and death in a very connective way, right? We're like doing this through connecting with nature and just observing the life around you and immersing yourself in it, and having these all these really deep and familiar sensations that I associated with, well, I need combat for that, obviously. I need danger, I need threat, I need death to be like breathing down my throat, and then so all of a sudden I'm just and at the same time, like as I was as I come out of the Marines and ended up like contracting, like I couldn't be at home because there was something wrong with me, and I think that's one of the single biggest misconceptions, and I think it's one of the most devastating misconceptions that sort of surround this whole experience of veterans coming home. And I think that's why conversations about combat and about the nature of combat and about its place in the human experience are vital, literally vital. Like they're life-giving, life-saving, and very life-supporting and empowering. But so during these few weeks at the tracker school, it just starts to dawn on me this unbelievable healing sensation, that, like, I remember like saying it was, it's like by myself, in the woods there, just sort of like, with like tears in my eyes, just like considering, like only considering, like, wow, there's nothing wrong with me. Like there's nothing wrong with me. Like I'm not broken. Like I just had this extremely different experience of life, which is, different enough to make it hard to relate to other, right? To not that experience. And yeah, and then so, and then like, so I called work and I was like, hey, work, I'm not coming back right away. I'm gonna, like, I need to check this out. So I stayed there for a few more weeks, and after a few more weeks, I was like, I had this huge internal revelation and just this huge shift in the potential that I saw with like my life's purpose was everything I was feeling that was healing and empowering inside me was taking me in a different direction than going back to work. And just, sort of, because at that point it was like, I can go pretend like this only exists in combat, and then I can just go keep pretending that, but there's something bigger here, and it's like just starting to open up, and it's like it's just starting to become available to like my growing awareness, and so, and I kept going back and forth. I was like, no, I gotta go back to work, no, I do this, and then I finally just sat down and I was like, man, like it would be so, I could just feel it, like it will be so bad for my heart if I don't pursue this like this path that's calling me, right? It's like, once again, like tack points, like tacking across the ocean is like, boom, this is a huge point, and this is a huge choice. And like I made the choice to, let's keep going with this, like connection, like awareness, tracking, and just this expanding our capacity for perception and our awareness of our perception and our capacity. And then that in and abouts led me to you, Ben, and I think I came for a week in 2013, and then I came again, and then I was like, oh man, I think I might stay. No, I can't stay. I have to go and travel the world and go wrestle grizzly bears and run with the wolves and do all this other sorts of, like super epic stuff. Feel like just, yeah, totally super epic nature man. And so and then I just kept doing that until it was like I had to like really expel that out of my system. Like I had to just keep going and going and going. And I think that's just kind of like the phase of life I was in. I was like 30, 32, 33, just like super prime, and I can do anything. And then it was like 2014, 2015, I'm like 34, 35. I'm like, okay, like starting to feel like my body's like, maybe you can't do everything. Because the more you try, like the more you're feeling the consequences. And then I ended up staying in Squim, I think from around 2015, and then I left a little bit more because I had to go do more epic stuff. And then I came 2017, and then I was ready. I was ready to land and be in one place and just like really, really investigate, like all these, all this primal potential, and really start to relax into it in a way. And so, yeah, I think we did the journey in 2017, 18, and then apprentice 2019. And, just looking at all these things, through martial arts and, yeah, and just the human journey.
Yeah, man. Your story is so powerful, and I think part of what makes it so powerful, because there's a lot of amazing stories out there, but you bring so much awareness to your story. It's really, really amazing. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, Mike's a martial artist as well, trains with Guru Ken and with me in the Art of Sleep Call. Been doing that a long time. So really rich blend of all of these perspectives on combat. So man, so epic. Why don't maybe we should, so since this is Primal Perspective, we're trying to look at things in this primal way from a principle and process perspective, and see through some of our normal assumptions. Everyone knows what combat is, right? But we have a working definition. But maybe we can, or if I ask you to try and define what combat is and why, we'll just start with that. Like, how would you define it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for the last couple of days, and one of the things that I ended up with that feels pretty congruent is it's like the willful engagement to disempower or cause harm in order to achieve one's means. And like that can look like so many things, and it can be very context dependent, and it can happen on every level.
Right.
But I think there's something really, at least if we're going to look at this in like the human nature sphere, is like that willful engagement, and I think that's important whether it's offense or defense, right? Whether you're initiating or whether you're responding, like you're acting willfully, whether it's to whether it's as the feeder or the one attacking or the receiver, the one defending. It's a willful engagement to disempower or cause harm in order to achieve one's means, which if whether your means are to cause harm and to create some sort of control or dominion, or your means are to protect yourself and like stay alive and just keep yourself safe or keep other people safe.
Yeah, so that definition kind of flows through different scales of what combat might mean. I like it.
Yeah.
Do you? So it's interesting. I think a lot of the folks that may be kind of tuning into this type of conversation or these primal perspectives are probably through some of the primal arts, the nature connection and rewilding world, right? And I've noticed kind of a void in a lot of cases of addressing combat. Like there's a lot of healing, there's a lot of living with the earth and deep connection and all this really cool stuff, but combat to me, or conflict maybe, was kind of left out. And why do you feel like it's relevant and important on this path of human nature development and evolution? Why is it an important area to tune into?
Yeah, I think like most of the time it's unpleasant, and there could be pain involved, and it could be tragic, and those are feelings or emotions or states that are difficult, and they're more easily avoided or disregarded, especially when we live in a culture or a society or a civilization where we are so insulated from like natural law. We're insulated from things that are unpleasant. We're insulated from the cold, we're insulated from the heat, we're insulated from like the big bad wolves and the grizzly bears and stuff, and I think when we don't have that balance, or when we have too much insulation, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, when we live in a way where we don't have a direct relationship with the feedback of our actions, and the consequences of our actions, it's really challenging or almost even impossible to make appropriate, effective, and even life-supporting decisions, because you don't know what effect your actions are having, because there's so much insulation between what we're doing and like we don't know where our garbage goes. Like we don't know the animal that is like on our dinner table. Like we don't know anything about that. We don't know so much about so much in our lives. And I think one of the interesting things about combat is it really, and it's like, when I experienced it like heavily, like full on, like the mortality is, like not just the football game or the baseball game or the wrestling match, but like there's people that are hunting each other and with the intention of killing each other, and that's a terrible thing, and it also, in a world that's so over insulated and so removed from natural law and so removed from any real sort of relationship with death or with their own mortality, and like a culture that's very resistant to acknowledge that as a very important and very very beautiful part of life. It's actually, it's like when you really look at it, they're not different, they're the same. And if we can't own that relationship with death, because life and death are so interwoven, they're so dependent on one another, they're so part of the same cycle, that if we can't own a relationship with death, like we can't really own a real authentic relationship with life. And I think there's something so beautiful about having a really close relationship with death, and not like in any like woo-woo way or any sort of way that isn't understandable, but if it's like the more we spend time in the natural world, right, the more we uninsulate ourselves from like all the things that are available to us from society to insulate ourselves from the natural world, it's so present, right? Death is everywhere. Death is the only reason that life can be here. it's this beautiful harmonious cycle. And when we start valuing life and not death, there's such a huge imbalance, you know. And it's like, we look at like the great mythologies too, and it's like there's like this perpetual occurrence, or this perpetual story that, man, if you keep trying to cheat death and you keep disrespecting it, and you don't honor it, and you know, we keep trying to subvert our mortality, like you know, like terrible things happen. And often it's like when we push death so far off and we resist it so much, at some point it's going to catch up. And depending on how far we push it and how much we squeeze it and how much we resist it, by the time it catches up, it's going to be so massive that, you know, it's probably going to be something, you know, really catastrophic in the rebalance of this like life and death and life and death. And but yeah, and I, you know, and death is sad, you know, it's loss is hard, and but it's an undeniable part of life, and you know, there's a beauty to it that that develops a strength of ownership of life that is, I mean, and for, you know, it almost has some immortal character to it, because you've surrendered to the cycle, right? You're allowing yourself to be part of the cycle, right? Part of that life, death, life cycle. Yeah. Yeah, and like, you know, with like combat too, it's, you know, it's an inherent part of our being. It's an absolutely inherent part of life. I mean, if we look at our bodies, for example, like, you know, on a cellular level, right? On a cellular level, we have battalions, right? We have regiments. We have, you know, we have divisions of little cellular soldiers that's their job, is they hold the line, and they, you know, they combat invasive substances, you know, bacterias and viruses and all these things that would seek to enrich their own life through taking ours. There's on a cellular level, there's a huge combative nature that without that we wouldn't get to live. You know, we wouldn't get to be alive. And we see that everywhere. We see that with, you know, like with trees and bugs and you know, like we see this balance of combat happening on some level, like something's trying to be here, something's trying to stay here, you know, and it's just the thing that's always happening. And I think if we don't allow ourselves to honor that and understand it, and not try to avoid it because it's uncomfortable, or because it's unpleasant, or because it's hard, you know, we're gonna miss out on half the story. And you know, I think to look at combat not as what, like, on a societal level we have put it in one certain context, right? I think you know, that's probably really easy for people to avoid or to condemn, you know, or to you know, try to ignore, or to like disavow. But to look at combat as just life really trying to continue to be here, and to do what it takes in whatever circumstances it's in to allow that to keep happening. You know, like that's our immune system. We're, you know, we're it's a it has a very combative character, and a job, that's its job, keep us alive by protecting us from all the things that are, trying to take away from us. And so I think there's just, like a perspective shift, and just, like an awareness of, okay, like combat, not as, like two guys with guns trying to kill each other, or, two guys with swords, or like people fighting for, whatever political narrative that has created the situation to begin with. But as really like it's a fundamental aspect or experience of life. And if life's going to keep doing life, combat's going to be a part of it.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Certainly a inevitable part of interaction, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of helps us find the balance. That's really cool approach to that. So let's see. How do you think? Well, maybe we can dive into this. What do you think? You have the definition. Do you mind repeating that definition you had again?
Yeah, it was the willful engagement to disempower or to cause harm in order to achieve one's means.
That's really, yeah. So earlier when you were talking, we both mentioned the role of the protector. So I'm curious on your thoughts lately on. So in combat we have the to simplify it, we have the two opposing sides or groups or whatever, right? Or forces. But where does I'm getting a something actually when you were talking about the people that are, or there's the person who's on the offensive and the defensive, and then there's this like kind of transjective, this outside role of protector. But I'm kind of curious how you're connecting to protector and maybe the distinction between protector and warrior right now, because if you go to the dictionary, I know it's going to say a warrior is one who engages in combat. That's basically the definition. And combat is anyway. So what do you have on that?
Yeah, gosh, it's like context. Like in all things, like context matters. But I think one of the beautiful things about the protector, and I think the thing that really drew me to it, even before I really knew what exactly was drawing me to it, it was like, man, I'd been a warrior for I'd been like a war fighting warrior for like 10 years, right? I had like I think in some way or a lot of ways I had exhausted it, at least in like my version. And when I started or I was introduced to like this way of the protector, what has sort of how I think about it now, it was just, okay, well, it's almost like the next phase of development. Because it's like when I was mentioning it, it's like there's like a guy on this side and a guy on this side, and the circumstances are that like they both believe that in order to get what they want, or in order to be here, one has to kill the other, and like that's the story, and these two sides, or these two belief systems, these two devotions are so they're so devoted that they're willing to risk their own life to do it, and they're willing to take another life. And one of the things about the role of the protector is it's like and the more, it's like the deeper I go, the more it just always comes back to awareness, right? And it's like, so there's a story over here and there's a story over here. And that's the fish bowls. Those are the fish bowls that are being occupied. And like, so there's this and this, and there's also this, there's another thing happening, right? There's a bigger thing going on that can hold this, you know, with awareness and understanding and, you know, like compassion and the same, right? And that can hold this too, right? Can see it, understand it, right? Track it. Like, yeah, okay, I totally get how this happened, right? I totally get how, you know, you or this entity has come to this. And there's, whether the protector or whoever's going to assume this role can see it or not, there is a bridge between this and this, right? There's a way, there's a resolution, right? That with enough awareness, you know, and I think that's like the role of the protector is to, you know, have enough awareness to see what's going on, see the dynamic, and have the awareness to see what's possible, right? How this can be resolved where, you know, like instead of having one thing kill the other to be here, we can still all be here and both can have some version of what they need, right? Or what they believe they need. And hopefully along with that, there's more awareness on both sides, right? Which, you know, is being held by the protector, right? This perspective that, you know, exists beyond this and beyond this, but holds them both, understands them both, you know, and honors them both as places people are. And also holds something that can hold them both, right? And, you know, get the two toddlers, you know, just like a parent, right? It's like, how can we get these two kids to stop beating the crap out of each other and, like, you know, get what they need by, you know, some sort of engagement where they're empowering one another, or at least not taking power from one another, right?
Yeah, that's cool. That really kind of frames the approach to combat that I focus on from in our Tribal Edge, you know, the curriculum. It's combat. It sounds hard and scary, and it is, but it's also looking at that scary element of life from a perspective much like you're describing. So that's really helpful to kind of to frame it.
Right.
It's not about just, go ahead.
Oh, you know, I was going to say too, well, you know, I think in the question you asked, also you mentioned like where, like the role of the warrior and the role of the protector, and where do they meet, how do they interact, what's the dynamic between them, and I think like in that too, right? There's, you know, because it kind of sounds, you know, like you know, like benevolent and this and you know, like the protector never gets involved and stuff, but you know, in all, you know, in all likelihood, that's not always going to be the case. And I think when we look at the, you know, and I was talking about it, like I really feel like it happened with me too. It was like, I mean, I really was doing everything I could to embody the warrior's path, right? That was a, you know, that was an identity, that was a way of life, that was the path I was on. And then there was this like, oh, wait. So I can do that, right? And I think this is really important, right? Like I can do that. I'm not going to be that anymore, but I can have that, hold that, and and like become something else, also something bigger, right? Something with more potential, more awareness, more choice, and still have that if I need it, right? So I think the warrior is like, the warrior lives inside of the protector as
Right.
like a tool, or like, man, if I can't work this out, if we can't resolve this, like peacefully, if we can't resolve this in just a life supporting way, and like the circumstances are as such as I have to protect myself with force, like, just like the cells, if the viruses are coming in and they're just like, they're just chewing on stuff, it's like, the warrior is an attribute in a way of the protector.
Yeah, and I would say, and see if you agree, that that's a necessary attribute. Like, you can't really say you're a protector if you don't have the capacity to follow through with that kind of, boundary creating or whatever, that kind of action.
Right.
Otherwise,
exactly.
you might be loving, but you're not able to protect. Yeah.
Exactly, right. Your capacity as a protector is, has a big hole in it. You can protect in, circumstances where, nobody's really trying to inflict harm upon you, or the people you're trying to protect, or whatever it is you're trying to protect. It's
Back to your definition of combat. Yeah. Are you willing to go to combat? Yeah. Or
right.
able. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Willing and able, and yeah. And there's, and I think that's just one of the really cool things about like our martial art, and the martial art that we study is, able. There's a lot of preparation that creates, it's like, 'cause you can be willing, boy, man, you can be super willing. Able, it really isn't something that you can just turn on without a significant amount of preparation, and I thought I knew what a significant amount of preparation was, coming into C-Call, and I think that's why I just came for a week here and there. I'm like, I'm just gonna learn something in a week, and then I kept going back and be like, good God, every time I come back, the art would explode, like exponentially, and I think at some point, a couple of years ago, I was just like, good God, I'm never going to get to the end of this. So I'm just going to stop trying to get to the end and just be here, and and do with what I have and what's, pretty much that. Just occupy what I have, and then keep stepping, right? Keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. I mean, I think in the arts of combat, the skill sets themselves, the better one becomes, or at the skill, the more skillful you become, the more I think you can embody the protector. So it's just like this long term. It's a journey, but it's certainly like, if you know a few things, if you know how to draw a gun or shoot well, you can protect in those situations which require maybe life and death. But if you have more skill, perhaps you can help de-escalate, or not turn everything into a lethal battle. So,
man, absolutely, and I think that's so important too, and I think that's just a really important concept, especially when it comes to combat, because it's like a huge part of combat is the trauma involved in causing harm, right? And so I think one of the things that training does is it expands our capacity to hold and honor and really exist in situations without things that without things getting so intense and so out of our realm of belief, really, that something like this could happen, that it actually like like short circuits our system, right? And so it's it's like like our primal brain just starts like like hijacking like our nervous system, and it's like and then there's things like PTSD that show up. And it's like if you, unless you can cope with the way life is changing, right? Which in a combat situation could be so quickly, right? Just boom, everything's different. Life that was here all of a sudden isn't, and it's like all of a sudden, relative to everything you've ever experienced as a human, this is so vastly different, and it's so fear-inducing that the cognitive functioning just, it doesn't have a place for it. It can't handle it. It's like it doesn't know what to do. It can't create a cohesive understanding and a functional way to go about processing and processing, let alone creating an action that's appropriate.
Right.
And I think that's like that's the power of training. That's the beauty of training, is we're just, and it's like one of the ways it's described is just like stress inoculation. It's just like how much different, or how much intensity, how much how much of what you're not used to can you handle before the system breaks down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think training in this way is so effective, but at the same time, it's important that it's done. It's important that it's done well, and it's important that it's done with a lot of attention, because too much, too fast, whether it's real life or in training, like it will override your system and it will traumatize you, right? It'll like literally like scar your nervous system. It's almost like, because I think one of the great gifts of combat too is this relationship with death, right? It's this realness of life. It's this exposure to your own mortality. And there's nothing, in my experience, in my opinion, there's nothing more vitalizing than really knowing what it is to be alive, because what it is to not be alive is right there. It's like all of a sudden life is a big deal. It's huge. And it's palpable. And two, with that, especially from a combat perspective, that can also get taken too far, like we're saying, and create these scars in the nervous system, or these traumatic events that short circuit our operating system. And it's like, to train to have the capacity to really be able to protect and occupy reality in a functional and appropriate way as a protector, to keep protecting life. The bigger your capacity to do that, the more comprehensive of a protector you're going to be. But it's like medicine, right? Medicine's super good for you, like in ways that you need it. But too much medicine it will kill you. And I think there's like that dynamic too. There's like, it's like enough to be helpful, right? And like as you grow, that will grow. But too much too fast, not only is it painful, but it's dysfunctional, right? And it's gonna create scarring, and it's gonna have effects that are gonna slow you down way more than benefit you.
Yeah, that's super, super important. While we're on this kind of discussing training a little bit, training for combat or the skills of protection, what have you learned, or let's say, what are some of the, to get back to the primal perspective here, what are some of the core concepts or principles that have helped you in learning how to face combat or prepare for combat? In other words, how to train. What are some things that have really been valuable for you at that level that we could maybe transfer to other people?
Yeah, I think one of the, or there's quite a few that come to mind right at the bat, but one of them is precision, right? If you're training for something, train precisely. Just I'll try and make this a short example, but during our workup for Afghanistan, we were just like months and months and months. We're just doing like training evolution after training evolution, and a lot of them were the circumstances were very similar because they were all based on after action reports that were coming from downrange, and so we're just like training and training and training, just like scenario after scenario after scenario after scenario, and by the time I got to Afghanistan, gosh, I'd just done what felt like millions of these things. And so our first patrol outside the wire, it was like the third day we were there. We're like in this convoy out in the middle of nowhere, and sure enough, like the bombs go off and there's small arms fire everywhere, and like after a few minutes, I remember having like my first cognitive, like conscious thought as I had like gotten, like, because I was in like a like the QRF vehicle, or like the quick reaction force vehicle. So as soon as everything happened, like I did this thing, like I started doing like these immediate action, like these drills, right, that were just drilled into us for for months and months, and so like bang, it's like boom, and we're like we're off, and like I'm on the radio, like I'm like directing like my guys, like like this and that.
Too, yeah.
What's that?
Complex task too, it sounds like.
Yeah, and then so we're like running sort of like down the flank of where to contact from, and I remember running and like seeing guys retreating and being like, wow, this is really happening, and I was like, wow, this one's for real, and I'm like, wow, and I don't even know, like I know how I got here, but like I didn't do anything. I just got here. And like all the things that happened that I did before, like right now, were just like they were so trained in me and so ingrained in me that I remember being like in that moment, I was astonished. I was like, wow, that worked. And like, and I think about that too. It's like when we do at the Scout Protector course, and we we go through scenarios, and it's like nobody wants to do the scenarios, right? That seems to always be the case, right? Nobody wants to do the scenarios because they're uncomfortable, and like there's conflict and there's combat, and you have to face the like the things that you don't want to face. They're just like, they're unpleasant, they're it's like whatever the story is, it's embarrassing, and you're not going to do the right thing, and it's like, but to train precisely for and that's just like and that's just like awareness too, like what are the things what are you training for, like what sort of scenarios, like what where do you need it, where do you think you need it, like doing your research and, you know, like looking at, you know, like probabilities and you know, like after action reports from, you know, like the civilian world, like what actually happens out there that, you know, where this shows up, you know, and to train for those in a way to where when things go crazy, it's like you have that, like you have that pathway, you have that neural pathway. It's like it's part of your subconscious system, so you don't have to worry about thinking your way through it. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about training too, because it's like if somebody out of nowhere just tries to punch you in the face, if there's any thought that takes place before you respond, you're gonna get punched in the face, and then you're gonna have to like regroup real quick and respond. But to train in a way where you train in those neural pathways to where when the traumatic stuff happens, like you have a trail through that, boom, and it just happens. You know, it's like when you see somebody like assuming the body posture position of what you've seen 1,000 times a day for the last 1,000 days, you know, like coming at you, it's like your subconscious just picks that up, and you don't have to think about it because you've seen it 1,000,000 times, and you've trained that. Like that means like I do this, you know, like that means like I put something like in between where they want to go and, you know, like what I want to protect. So yeah, I think precision is huge, and also, you know, just like persistence. It seems like a huge one, and that's something like I struggle with too. You know, I'm really good at procrastinating, and it really seems like, you know, personally, like I love training in groups. Like I love the energy. I love all the feedback. I love the perspectives. You know, like I love the, you know, like the field, you know, like that presence that shows up when, you know, when there's a bunch of nervous systems like engaging in the same, you know, way, looking to do, yeah, totally. But yeah, you know, I think persistence is really important. You know, I think just as important as precision. You know, it's like you want to be precise in what you're training, and also have the capacity and have the awareness to be able to take the principles of what you're training and adapt them to, you know, the myriad and the multitudes of detailed circumstances that can happen.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's see. How about what's involved? Let's see. Is there anything else in the training process that you have? Any other lessons you want to pass along? I'll just speak generally, see what I can squeeze out of you. What comes to mind? Could be, and I'm kind of leaving it vague because I don't necessarily mean just martial arts, but I really enjoy your example of in the field there. What else do people need to know about the process of training?
Yeah, you know, man, the process of training, you know, that's been, you know, something that's like really evolved, you know, for me, you know, through CCall and through Tribal Edge. You know, was this like primarily coming in with, you know, like this attitude, like, yeah, you know, just teach me all the things, and then, you know, and then I'll know, and then I'll be cool, and then, you know, like I'll get to wear, you know, like the T-shirt and be, you know, like a part of the club and stuff. And I think, you know, that's one of the really interesting, and I think that's one of the most it was one of the most provocative things for me, especially with Tribal Edge, is like I wasn't getting taught all the things, and it was like something else was happening and I couldn't figure it out, and there were all these there was all these weird words being thrown around you, like principles and concepts and like context and natural law and natural principle and I'm just like, yeah, first played along like I know what's going on, but I had no idea. Not really. And but that but I wanted to know, and so I kept coming back and I kept just paying attention. I'm not a big question asker, which is tough in this philosophy. It's like like the Tom Brown like Stalking Wolf philosophy. It's like, man, that the thing begins and ends pretty much with the sacred question, and I hate asking questions out loud. I think I'm always asking questions internally, and I'm always paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm always paying attention, to try and get the answers to my internal questions. Yeah, and I think that also, there's just a bunch of my stuff in there, it's like a lot of more look stupid, and God forbid, I don't want to fail. Right. I think that that idea, right, of fail bad, fail shame, fail just go bury yourself in the backyard and just call it quits was it was really debilitating, and even in a way that I would just pretend that I didn't fail, and just which is it's such a crippling, it just cripples the cycle, because really, and I think especially through the martial art and then it seeps into everything. It seeps into every art, or every skill. It's and just sort of looking at how important failure is, and not only how important failure is, but really how inherent failure is. Because it's really what is perfect? What is doing something perfect? It's what does that even mean? And if we keep looking closer, it starts to really sort of become not a thing. And but one of the really pivotal moments, I think, in my training was and my relationship with failure was it was man, it's the best, these instructors or masters, these people that they just look perfect. Well, it's that might not be as true as they fail on such a small scale that you just can't see it anymore, really, unless you have that master's perception, that ability to see that distinctly. But really, and so it became this really fun thing, to just suck less. Man, right on. If I can just keep showing up and just keep sucking less and less, man, that's that's the game. That's the thing. That's that's what's going to get me to where I want to go, or to who I want to be, is just to keep failing less. Just keep letting my awareness seep into movements and ways of being that are just a little more appropriate or a little more cute, or yeah, and to just keep doing that until those, until I just suck on a really small scale. Man.
I love that, man. I'm gonna have to add that to
life, really.
I'm gonna have to add that to keep going and suck less. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, get a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, I'm just noticed our time. I could get into this forever. I know we could go on and on. So I just want to, well, we'll go a little bit more, but I've got a few more questions for you. I want to try and get to here. How are you doing for time?
Good.
This is an interesting one. If you could only, how about this? What is what has been your biggest challenge with combat, personally?
Man, yeah. I think, geez, that's a terribly easy one, I think, for me anyway. I think it has been like the reconciliation of such a, I think, of the intensity and the immensity that, or like the immensity of life and the connected nature of just being, in regards to like relationship with myself, relationship with my identity even at the time, and my relationships with the people, the Marines that I was with through it all. Right? It was like there's such, one of the things that combat does, whether we like it or not, is it brings us right here, right now, abruptly, and if we don't adhere to that, there's huge consequences, right? There's like, from a life-death perspective, there's the ultimate consequence, or from a protector's point of view, there's the ultimate consequence of, man, your people aren't here anymore because you weren't here and you couldn't occupy the moment well enough, right, or appropriately enough, and like to spend so much time with a certain amount of people in that state, like over and over and over again, and to have it just become it's just an inherent part of your experience. It's like it just becomes your experience of life, for months, and then so much so that you don't even see it happening, relative to what the rest of the world might be experiencing. So it was coming out of combat and really, and I think from that perspective I was in, like appropriately being caught in this belief that sort of vitality, that sort of connection, that sort of like presence with self, like that sort of like vital presence in the moment, like it only existed in combat. And in order to have that, I couldn't be with my family, right? I couldn't be with my friends. I couldn't be with all the things that I was looking so forward to going home to after all this, and just being sort of heartbroken over, wow, this like the most transformative, the most evocative experience of my life is gone and it's over, and I won't be able to have that anymore. And to try and there's this big gap, and it was almost, I couldn't see any possibility for reconciling or bringing these two worlds together, right? Like the world at peace, right, and the world at war. And I think in a big way, as I talked about a little bit at the beginning, like that misconception that because it's for me and for a lot of people, a lot of Marines and veterans, combat veterans, and people that have had really intense experiences, and don't don't see the bridge to reconcile those, there's like this really deep sensation that there's, it's your fault. Like you're broken. There's nothing you can do. There's something wrong with you. That is, it's definitely been, it was, and, to some degree, still the hardest thing I think I've ever had to deal with, is, and, but awareness helps so much, right? When we take combat out of this singular idea that we have of it, and we start to understand it as really this fundamental aspect of life and of the existence of life and being here, it changes everything, right?
Yeah.
It changes everything, and it really becomes this beautiful thing, to go back and like look at, like, why do I love my Marines so much, right? It's like, we had this reunion last January, and I hadn't seen these guys in 14 years, and they picked me up at the airport, and I looked at these guys, and it was like we were together yesterday. And it was like, it's like snappy, like offensive comment, boom, snappy offensive comment back, and we're like, oh, here we are, and it's just like, and I think there's also, when combat, well, it's like, one of the things combat really does is it makes you vulnerable, right? And there are a lot of ways to be vulnerable, but combat is it's like the sledgehammer approach. You want to be vulnerable, like here's your mortality, and it's like when you so you're so open, and you're so vulnerable, and our capacity for connection and relation when we're occupying our vulnerability is just off the charts. It's from a really insulated perspective, it's hard to even imagine the capacity for connection and relationship when you have a group of people who are just super vulnerable together. And then and so it's like, man, it's like forging metal together, right? It's like there's the heat, there's the pressure, that's like making that metal vulnerable, and they, in order to survive, right, they're like melding together and becoming this functional thing that's gonna be able to withstand the danger and withstand the the fire and the circumstances. And it's like there's it's like we talk about oneness and like things like that, and it's like, man, if I know oneness to any degree, I know it with my Marines. It's like that thing. It's like there's like they're just not separate, and like ever since we never have been, and it's like it's so visceral. It's so visceral in my body. To I'm so aware of that, yeah. So it's really beautiful when when our awareness reaches a point to where we can look at combat as just as a pretty inherent aspect of being and staying alive, and then we can really start to look deeply into like our personal relationship with it and our personal circumstances, which is just like healing, right? We're just taking these dark spots and we're just like, shedding awareness on them, just like so we can integrate them into our, into our conscious experience in a way that's wholesome, right? In a way that's empowering, and it's like, gosh, it is so healing, right? We're just like making ourselves like more whole, right? It's just like taking the parts of our experiences, that we're trying to ignore, right? That we're trying to keep separate from what we're trying to pretend maybe is whole, and we're actually making bringing those pieces in and becoming more whole. And it's just life, man. Life is it's just all the things. It's just all the things.
Yep. All the things all the time.
Yeah.
If you could only share one thing about combat, you might have already, but if you could only share one thing, or I'll combine this with another question, is what do you think people are missing? We're seeing a lot of separation in our world, and potential conflict, and I don't know, it feels like there is a need for more awareness there. But in your experience, if there's one thing you could share, or what do you think people are missing about combat, what would that be?
Yeah, there's a few different things that come to mind. I think one of the things that I want to say from a protector perspective is, if this is as much as an awareness thing as anything, and it's a very preemptive awareness thing too, is if we've come to a place where violent combat is the most viable choice, we've missed some huge things along the way. Really, we've failed. And right now we're going to have to reconcile those failures in the most appropriate way, which, if it's violent combat, is a real bummer. It's it's with enough awareness, there's always a better way. With enough awareness, there's always a better way. And I heard I think I heard you say this once, is there's always a way, and there's always another way. There's always a way to move forward, and there's always another way too. But I think if we do come to a place, whether it's in our lives personally or collectively, that violent combat is the most appropriate choice. It's I want to get this out there now so we can start paying attention now. It's if that's the most viable choice, we have missed so much along the way. That's, it's we have missed so many opportunities to create something different. And we've missed so many that now we're all going to have to pay for it. Because, I think one of the it's almost I want to say unique thing about combat is if active combat, especially violent combat, is if that's the choice, if that's what we have, we all lose. We all lose. Even if we win, we lose.
Wow. Yeah.
And, and I think that's hard for a culture that is very competitive, like competition oriented and very goal oriented, and very sort of caught in the idea that it's dog eat dog world. Got to climb your way to the top. But really, if we look at it from a collective, right? If our most viable choice is that we have to eliminate other beings in order to get what we want, we lose. We all lose. And it's like taking life on any level, right? From a collective perspective is there's pain there, right? There's loss, right? There's loss. But for humans to take human life, man, we all lose. We all lose. And I think that's something that can be understood as a concept and like, yeah, of course, but man, there's really no making that okay. And it's like, even if that's the most viable choice, you lose. And you're going to carry that loss for as long as you live. And, you'll feel it. And you'll carry it around with you. And, I think it's really something that anybody should really consider, and not just consider, but consider deeply. For humans to take other human life, everybody loses. Everybody loses.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's, unless you have any other final thoughts, Mike, I think that's probably, not to be too much of a downer, but I think it's so powerful and so important of a note.
It is. Yeah. It really is. It's that important.
Is there anything else, any final thoughts you have before we close? There's so much here, man. We could unpack this for a long time. We'll have to do another one, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All kinds of stuff being left out. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your service, by the way, and also thank you for your perspective in this sharing, and really hope that people are able to extract from it as much as I have, and yeah, excited, man, to share this path with you. Appreciate you very much.
Right on. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Always.
Until next time.
Take care.
And cut.
Whack. One of the real difficulties about combat is, especially from a protector perspective or a life-preserving, life-protecting, life-empowering perspective, is this huge contradiction that shows up in navigating this concept, this thing that shows up in life. And one of the things I think is really important to understand is that when combat, when for whatever reason we get to a place where combat becomes the most viable choice for protecting and preserving life. Well, for one, if that is the case, then somewhere along the way, or at many points along the way, our preemptive awareness has failed. And we're all just so human, and we're all learning and growing, and just constantly figuring out how to increase our capacity. And so this is going to happen undoubtedly. And also, too, I think it's so important to understand that when combat becomes the most viable option, no matter what side comes out at the end claiming victory with whatever they have left, when combat is the choice and combat is what happens, we all lose. We all lose. And we see that with, you can see it with cage fighters. After 20 minutes of just beating the crap out of each other, at the end of that fight, neither one of those two fighters is more than what they came in with. They're exhausted, they're beat up, they've taken incredible amounts of punishment, and they're just less than what they were at the beginning. And we can see this with two armies on the battlefield, right? Once that decision for combat is made and action is taken, no matter what happens, no matter who wins or who claims victory with whatever it is they have left, neither one of those two armies is more than what they were. And with that, we have the opportunity to grow from what is going to be inherently less, and to hopefully grow into something more, right? That's what we see with gardeners tending their garden, weeding their garden, cultivating and empowering and enriching life by taking life. We see this in the cells of our bodies, like our white blood cells, our immune system, like actively engaging in combat, on a cellular and hormonal level to keep us alive from other things that would seek to take what we have and use it for, their own means. We see this with arborists pruning their fruit trees in order to create more abundant life from that tree, and we see it with human beings at certain times taking life in order to protect and preserve life, and that responsibility is so big, it's so huge, and it deserves the utmost attention and awareness and devotion. And one thing also to keep in mind is that one of the biggest things about combat is the consequences. And lose or win, there are heavy consequences. Of course, losing is a huge consequence. Maybe from a physical life standpoint, could be the ultimate consequence. And winning in a combat situation also has its consequences. Taking life, it has its consequences. And human life, taking human life, especially in order to preserve human life and protect human life, it's a really difficult contradiction, and it's something that deserves the deepest introspection and the most devoted sense of attention and awareness, and you know, really, it even if and when it does come down to that, you know, for, you know, in my opinion, from my perspective, taking life, even to preserve and protect life, it should be a sacred thing. And it allows us to keep respecting life no matter what, because life is the thing we're after to begin with, and all of it deserves our respect. And when we do have to make a choice, you know, that terrible choice that we may come to take life in order to protect and preserve life, then it deserves our utmost and ultimate attention and respect, and to treat it as such, you know, as a sacred thing, because life is sacred, and to deny that has its consequences, and you know, those consequences are harsh, and those consequences don't empower life. And so, in navigating this world, so to speak, of combat and its place in humanity and its place in just life on Earth as a whole, is just something to be approached with a huge amount of respect and a huge amount of awareness and a huge amount of humility.